Are cracks really starting to form in the relationship between Prince Harry and Meghan Markle? Yes, the two looked unbelievably uncomfortable with each other during this recent CBS interview. It was a very different display than their usual loved upness, where they are constantly holding hands, touching each other, doing all these sorts of things. Excessive PDA for most people. And in this particular CBS interview, 100% that is nowhere near there. In fact, Meghan puts her hand on Harry's knee multiple times and he fails to react a single time. He does not touch her. He hardly even looks at her. And it's rather fascinating because much of Harry and Meghan's public image has been wrapped up in this excessive PDA that they've always done. And I've always said the second you're not doing that, the second you guys look super out of sync, it's going to be glaringly obvious. And this, of course, is the moment. Now, we've seen different bits from time to time, but I feel like this is like the true interview where they're on camera. They know they're on camera. This is not like the UN where Harry dropped her hand and she grabbed both of his and dragged it over onto her lap. And they weren't probably sure exactly maybe where the camera was or how focused it was on them or whatever. This is totally different. They are on camera. They know they're being interviewed and they don't play the game all of a sudden. And so, obviously, number one, it brings up that perhaps most of the PDA was maybe somewhat fake to begin with, which many people supposed. But it also raises some fascinating questions about the state of their relationship. Did they have a fight beforehand? Were there other issues going on? Were they mad at the interviews, mad with the situation? Something, because they were clearly unhappy. And some of it was due to the questions Jane Pauley was asking them because she was challenging them on some of their suppositions, to be sure. But also is, I think their relationship is starting to maybe hit the skids a bit. And obviously, you don't want to wish a divorce on anyone. But given the terrible track record that they've had, especially the last 4 years, all the struggles, challenges that they have inflicted on themselves, it's no wonder cracks are beginning to form. And again, I would say the only people Harry and Meghan have to blame really is themselves, because this wouldn't have happened if not only they had stayed within the royal family, of course, but if they had made efforts to really build bridges between various family members, they'd be in, I think, much better place. Instead, they've gone from disaster to disaster, challenge after challenge, and now it's really starting to catch up with them. And that they could not contain their reactions is unbelievable in some ways, and especially Harry. He was not a happy camper for most of this. So we are going to explore this today. But if you guys haven't been to Royal News Network before, my name is Brittany. I provide y'all compelling royal commentary. So feel free to hit that subscribe button. I would love to have you back. In addition, I just want to give a huge shout out to Ana Lucia Diamonds and my new 2-carat diamond studs that they gave me. They are lab created diamonds. I am loving these studs here. They are amazing. I love studs. And I know perhaps some people, you may have heard this before, but I think there's a couple things that I think are key pieces within your jewelry, and studs are one of them because you can wear them every day and you can keep them in all the time. And so if you have an early morning flight or if you have a long day out with your kids or something, and you just need something simple, something that looks very elegant and classy, a diamond stud is definitely the way to go. So if you guys are interested in these, I will link them up above. And if you use code Royal20, you shall save 20%. And they have them in a variety of different sizes, carat sizes. So if you're interested in something a bit smaller, something a bit more manageable, of course, there are those options there as well. So I've already sort of dissected most of what they said. Now, there were a couple pieces I missed because I was doing essentially just a live reaction, so I wasn't able to think on it. So I may do something larger in terms of this parents network they're trying to create, which was the whole impetus for this. What they wanted to do is raise awareness for this cause. However, basically everybody who's a part of it was there at this little launch event. And part of the problem is, and if you've ever watched Shark Tank, Mark Cuban says this all the time, if you are relying on publicity to make your thing successful, it probably will fail at some point because the best success is organic. So yes, they've found, it looked like 5 families, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe 10 families at most. Great. If they find help through your network, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think they should have focused more on organic growth rather than cramming it down everyone's throats because they are terrible ambassadors for this, especially because Meghan has herself been accused of being a bully. It's also too broad. You have people in there who have lost their kids to bullying, depression, and drug overdose, all connected to social media, but also very different issues. So, how are you supposed to address all these different issues? It was more seemingly about a parent group of those who've lost their kids somehow connected to the internet. And while that's not bad, in terms of growth, sometimes it's better to start off small and really, you could say, conquer that market before broadening it. So I feel like bullying may be a good idea, but maybe they knew since Meghan Markle has been accused herself of being a bully, they couldn't start with that, so they had to make it super broad, which I think diminishes its impact. But what I found most interesting really throughout all of this is not only that they're still inept at really their post royal career, but how out of sync they were. And we've seen this brief glimpses of this from time to time. Of course, as I said in the intro, the most obvious example is Harry and Meghan at the UN, and he drops her hand, puts it in his own lap. She gives him 2 seconds, grabs his entire arm and drags it over into her lap and two-hand death grips it. So this has been something that we've seen from time to time that maybe he's not quite as into it as she is in terms of the PDA. Maybe they are like once the camera's off and they're not sure they're being filmed quite as much, you see sort of the real Harry and Meghan come out. But what's interesting is that this was on full display this entire time in this interview. Harry, when he was able to speak, which was just at the very beginning, he seemed very confident in what he was saying. Not saying it was good, but confident in what he was saying. And then it was mostly Meghan the rest of the time. And Harry looked dejected. Even when it began, he looked pretty dejected. He's looking elsewhere, like over her head. And so his eye line is not meeting her, even when she puts her hand on his knee, when Jane Pauley's going to ask her about her own thoughts, her own negative thoughts at one point that she was contemplating, allegedly thinking of ending her life. He doesn't even look at her. He doesn't hold her hand. He has no reaction to her. So let's go ahead and get into this. Not going to drag on the intro too long. But this was, again, very unexpected because if you are planning, especially if you have PR professionals around you and you've cultivated this certain image, your whole purpose in this interview is to continue this image, which they completely failed to do. In fact, I think there's multiple PR failures here. So we're not going to go over everything they said, but there's just some key instances. And so I will start off with their intro, and I am going to slow the speed down. I initially had thought about just pulling in various clips, but I thought, you know what, sometimes you need to actually hear them. So let's do it this way so I can adjust the speed. And so let's get in. Watch them walk in. Meghan's confident, very smiley, and Harry just doesn't look quite as engaged here. He just doesn't look quite, he gets excited, but they're not holding hands. They're not being super lovey-dovey, which they are most of the time. And the problem is when you set up this precedence that you are so lovey-dovey, as soon as you're not lovey-dovey, it's unbelievably obvious. And we have plenty of examples of them being excessive in terms of their PDA, holding hands constantly, her touching him constantly. The moment you stop doing that, people are immediately going to go, what's wrong? And that's what I do. What's wrong? What's wrong? You stopped doing the thing you were always doing. It looks now that you're out of sync. And it looks like, and I mean, in some parts of this interview, he is literally completely leaning away from her. I mean, that's telling. I don't even know body language. I should have made this disclaimer. Guys, I know nothing about body language, really. But I am a human being. And so we all notice little things. And of course, the PDA was the first thing I noticed about Harry and Meghan because it's something Catherine and William and most royals generally don't do because it lacks a professionalism. Royals, when they are on duty, they're working. It's not a date. It's not a moment where you're there to be all, hunky-dory and just loving and kissing on each other and everything. It's not that because you're working. Yes, you're working with your spouse, but you're on a job. It's not a date. And Harry and Meghan, I felt like so often portrayed their royal duties as a date. And it became this thing where they looked like they were in their own world constantly. And that's not the purpose of royal engagements. Yes, there is, I feel like with Catherine and William, they have this close relationship. And so there's somewhat a cocoon when they're together because they are aware of trying to keep their relationship private and everything like that. And so they are reacting to each other for sure because they are a couple. But Harry and Meghan, it just came across as there it was almost them against the world every single time. And that meant it was that they were unable, I feel like, to connect with the people they were really trying to. But this is definitely a little different here. And so they have to come in, and Meghan's a hugger, so she must hug. And Harry's being a little bit different back here, and he is hugging people too. But Meghan's a hugger. She's a stage 4 hugger. Like stage 4 clinger that they say, she's a stage 4 hugger. She likes to hug. And so I thought this was kind of interesting, Harry and Meghan standing back here, because I feel like in some of this, Meghan tended to look a bit awkward. So not right here. So Harry's chatting, he's having a moment. But then Meghan right here, I feel like she's like super like, oh gosh, I have to interact with the peasants now, don't I? In her decked out head to toe in Cartier jewelry. She has to interact with the peasants, and she didn't seem too enthused about it. And I felt like I saw this a bit here that she's kind of like, she's got the forced grin. She's got the forced grin in this instance. And not that that's necessarily bad. She doesn't really know these people. But the whole point is you're taking these people's stories and you're using it to promote yourself in your organization. So a plastered on grin, especially when it's such an intimate group, is not really a great look. And I gotta say too, the Parents Network. I'm curious what the symbolism is behind the color here. I just think it's a boring name, and it's not much. But I mean, Archwell Foundation, the Parents Network. If you really care about this, like, why does it matter that it's part of the Archwell Foundation? Just make it the Parents Network and make it its own separate thing. But I have to say, Meghan, of course, looked very happy to meet Jane Pauley. And we do have the pretentious pinky ring on. Again, multi-carat pinky ring. And of course, touching Jane and directing Jane. Meghan tends to do this with people. She tends to touch and direct them to different things. So he goes in, pulls her in for a hug, and there's James over there, and he looks like he's about to direct people. You can see Meghan in the background, and of course, a bunch of camera people, because this is all being done for the cameras in many ways. And so Jane, I would have to say, is being pretty professional here, and James, of course, is there to direct and tell everybody what they're going to do next, because this, again, is all about promoting Archwell in this organization, not really the parents, not really their stories. And honestly, again, the stories are so broad and factor in different things. Somebody with a drug addiction, it's very different than somebody's being bullied online. I'm sorry, those are generally probably very different things. And maybe there are some correlations between the stories we don't know. But I think when you are promoting an organization, you need to be clear what the goals and objectives are. And I don't think that is clear here. So when they begin here, I find it interesting that Harry looks very, I feel like, nervous and on point. And Meghan's just kind of got this plaster on. Like, you can tell she's on. I think I said this in my last video. Like, the lights and cameras are on. This is serious, Meghan. You just get that sense and that feeling from them here. She almost has this, like, it's not plastered on, but it's like a tense. She seems tense. She's not relaxed in this. She's very tense here, and she's very intent on getting her point across. You can kind of feel that she's like, "Okay, let's go. Let's go. Let's go." And so he, though, looks completely out of it. He looks totally and completely out of it. But he does have, I wouldn't say a great response, but he does begin their bit here, and I don't think it's too bad. So let's change it back to normal. And so when it says suffered, the reactions, I think, are kind of interesting. So let's go back to slow speed.
Unspeakable grief.
They're like, you almost feel like his mouth is sort of open. And they have this thing where they like kind of both react as if like she kind of tenses and wiggles in her seat and he looks really uncomfortable. They both look uncomfortable. So let's watch this briefly again. The way he blinks and everything, it's wild here. So let's even slow it down further. Like the way she blinks, the way he blinks, they look really uncomfortable. And they should, I mean, this is a serious topic, but they really shouldn't be that uncomfortable, to be honest. They should not be this uncomfortable because this is supposedly what they're experts in. And yes, it overlaps with some of their personal experience, but they're supposedly the leaders here.
stories that need to be shared because the parents who are listening.
There's not too much you can glean from that, but it looks like Meghan is just so intent and trying to show her best Meghan concerned face. She's trying to show her very, very Meghan concerned face. And Harry kind of looks just tense. He just looks tense and not really engaged at all in this. I mean, that's what's so surprising. It's like, this is your thing. This is your organization. Why are you guys seemingly so out of touch with it? It's odd. And so what I find fascinating is that immediately when he starts talking, and let's listen to what Harry says here briefly. He immediately leans away from her.
They certainly could. And that's,
So his first response when asking a question is to lean away from his wife.
I think, one of the
And
scariest things.
she doesn't seem all that connected with what he's saying. She's almost like emotional, but it's like weird because it's like this is not really, I mean, it's somewhat emotional, but not at the same time.
That we've learned over the course of the last 15, 17 years that social media's been around, and more so recently, is the fact that it could happen to absolutely anybody.
And then Harry goes on his thing talking about how if your child you don't know what's happening if your child has an iPad in their room and they're on their iPad. It's like, or they say tablet in this particular situation. And my first thought is, and again, it still is, why is your child alone in their room with a tablet? They should not be alone in their room with a tablet. My mother would never allow that if she was raising us now. I don't think most parents, that's a good idea. And that is never brought up here again, is that you should not be allowing your child alone in their room with a tablet. That's probably not the best idea. But let's again watch a little bit of the body language here. He looks away. She reacts, blinks several times, and kind of looks, it's like weird because she looks into nothing really. Is she trying to, it's just odd to me. Does she look frustrated? I don't know. I don't know exactly. But she doesn't look particularly happy. And again, this is a serious topic and I somewhat get that. But I feel like if your husband's talking generally, you should be looking at them, or because most of the time that is what she's usually done, is really look intently at him. But here she's not doing that at all. And so it is kind of odd. And so then Harry goes a bit more and she's watching him, and I feel like she looks a little tense watching him, going, oh gosh, what is he going to say? What he's going to say? This is my thing. This is my thing. And again, just a suggestion, probably not have your kid alone with their tablet in their room without your supervision. Just going to put that out there. And what's odd is they're talking about this tablet issue, and then it immediately goes into talking about their kids. So let's listen to this, because this is kind of, it's almost weird because it almost feels like two different parts of the interview smashed together.
And before you know it, within 24 hours, they could be taking their life.
And again, Harry's saying within 24 hours of them being alone in their bedroom, what, they're taking their life? Well, then again, why are you giving your kid an iPad to hang out in their room? And that might be the school of parenting for Harry and Meghan. So let's
Hours, they could be taking their life.
Our kids are young. They're 3 and 5. They're amazing.
What does that have to do with anything that he just said? He just said, I mean, what Meghan could have done, which was great here, because she looks totally disconnected from what he said. And I've gone through the body language of this particular section, so I won't do it again. But like the jump from, oh, your child could have a tablet in their room and within 24 hours, they've lost their life. But, our kids are 3 and 5 and they're just amazing. And so, and, she goes on to say something about protecting them. And then Harry interrupts her and she's not too happy about that. But it's just the overall notion that you're there talking essentially about yourself and your kids and never mentioning. And, because of that, because here's the thing, good PR, and Harry and Meghan, I think, have a terrible PR team, whatever it is. What you should do in this particular situation is you talk about the challenges that parents face, right? What you should do is take what Harry said, they're having their child alone in the room, and Meghan should go, yes, our children are 3 and 5. And, one of the things we've done as parents, one of the decisions we've made as parents is to not allow them to play on a tablet without our direct supervision. And we have learned this by talking with the parents within our network. Because what you're getting is complete disconnect between what Harry and Meghan are saying and what the parents in the network have experienced. And there's no lessons learned. Like they're not passing on any lessons. The first job is to not blame the parents. So if Harry and Meghan leave their child alone in their room with an iPad and something bad happens, it has nothing to do with them. It's not their fault. That's essentially what they say in this interview. And I just want to reiterate again, parenting is 100% hard. The ubiquitous nature of technology, how convenient it is, how it's everywhere, how we can't really escape it. I understand that's really hard, but I think there's obvious things that you can do as well. So just putting that out there real quick. And I just don't like how Meghan is completely seemingly disconnected from whatever else is going on, but all of a sudden talking about our kids and how we want to protect them, but not saying one of the things we're not doing is let our child have a tablet alone in their room. I just find that very disconnected. So that was the last time pretty much Harry talked. And so then we moved on to parents who have lost their child. And this, of course, is very sad. And they don't seemingly know anything about why that happened. I just want to say that I feel like Harry and Meghan look very uncomfortable. Look at Meghan. She looks really uncomfortable to me. Harry's looking at them. Meghan's looking at Jane Pauley. It's like she's gauging Jane Pauley's reaction. Is she listening? Is she getting it? Is she getting it? And I feel like Meghan's focus, of course, should be on the mom who's talking, not this wide-eyed kind of look to Jane Pauley going, do you see the seriousness of this? The story should be enough in and of itself. And then you have Meghan, of course, nodding along to the mom. And the only critique I have of this particular story is I don't feel like it's the strongest. And I don't feel like it's particularly helpful because their answer is we have no clue what happened. Well, there must have been something somewhere. And so, again, Harry and Meghan, not only are they bad ambassadors for whatever they're trying to promote, but they generally pick people who are also not great ambassadors for what they're trying to share out there. Because when it comes to, let's say, the Invictus Games, Heart of Invictus, they chose people in some instances who were not injured in combat or who didn't develop mental health issues after combat. They had it before, and then those issues got exacerbated. And so because of that, it sort of diluted the overall message of the Invictus Games, which I feel like is focusing on those who have been injured in combat and helping them re-enter their life. I don't understand why they didn't focus more on people who experienced an injury in combat rather than a guy who lost his arm in a motorcycle accident in Florida. Even though he was a veteran, not taking that away from him. Of course, he can compete, but he's not a great advocate for it because I think part of the appeal of the Invictus Games is helping those who were injured in combat in terrible situations and circumstances, who had been backed out of the country and who had terrible experiences and all these sorts of things and were away from home and all this, rather than a situation that was close to home. Because then they went to this guy's hometown and they were talking about his experiences and like abusive home and everything. And it's like, well, of course, that's part of his story, not taking any of that away from him, but that also doesn't seem to be the emphasis of the Invictus Games. And I feel like the same thing is here. If this organization is supposed to help prevent things, well, then you want to have somebody who can tell you something that they feel like went wrong, or if something they feel like that can be helpful to you. Somebody going, I have no clue what happened. It was just the darn phone. How is that supposed to help anybody? And so anyways, I feel like Meghan looks uncomfortable here. And then it kind of sort of gets worse. So Meghan is looking at her, trying to seem very uncomfortable. But I think Meghan looks uncomfortable, to be quite honest. I think she looks rather uncomfortable in this situation. And of course, they have to go into what happened to Meghan. So I thought this was interesting when I noticed it. So they start off with that and then they re-interview. Like I almost wish they had kind of done the thing, not where it went totally black and then came to Meghan, but went from Meghan to black. Went like that you could almost see Meghan superimposed on top of Meghan. I thought that would have been more interesting than kind of totally going to black. So let's listen to a little bit of what Jane asks her, because this gets rather interesting. Because Meghan is not expecting this question. And although I didn't catch this, but I can see this, that Meghan is definitely irritated. I feel like things did not go to script here. So.
And an experience that connects you to these families. And I see you touch your husband's hand and
Meghan's touching her husband. but he's not touching her. And he's not even looking at her. And I feel like this is an uncomfortable smile here because maybe the cracks are really starting to hit them. So let's go back and watch it in slow motion. The rough smile rubbing his knee. Zero reaction from him. Zero reaction from him. Zero. Absolute zero reaction from him. She's talking about Jane Pauley is asking about a connection, and Harry could not look more disconnected from her unless he literally moved his knee away from her. He could not look more disconnected. I feel like in this instance, he should have either been looking at her, put his hand over her hand, something. He didn't do it. He did not do it. You can almost see here echoes of what happened with the EBSFI's awards, where it looked like Meghan, was two-handing his arm as he walked up on the stage. Like, his arm had to slip through two of her hands. And I feel like she wanted him to lean down and kiss her before he went up and accepted the awards, and he didn't do that. He was more focused on the stage and the soldiers than he was in her. And I don't think she was particularly happy with that. And you have this instance here yet again where she's trying to fake this connectedness, but he's not reciprocating. He's literally leaning his head away from her. So I don't know what happened. Again, I don't know if there was a fight beforehand. I don't know if they both got frustrated with how this was being handled by Jane Pauley. I don't know if they were frustrated with their team. I don't know what happened. But he's not a happy camper, and she becomes not a happy camper here in a second. So let's go ahead and listen to a little bit of this.
That you would be looking after each other if I went places. But
So Meghan's, can understand that. But then Jane Pauley goes in a direction I don't think Meghan wanted her to go in.
the connection that you have with people is they know you had suffered too, personally, contemplating killing yourself.
And
What
let's see.
suicidal ideation was. And
They don't really have much of a reaction to this because I don't think they were expecting it. And Meghan reacts to that later, but let's slow it down a little bit. So Meghan's like frozen. She's like, oh, crud. She's going there. Shoot. And I thought it was weird. Jane Pauley was like, I'm dancing around the question, which she wasn't really. She was being pretty direct. I've seen people dance around that phrase more because you got to be careful what phrases you use on YouTube because you could get your video not demonetized, but could impact its reach and those sorts of things. So Meghan looks really uncomfortable and Harry looks somewhat uncomfortable, but almost like, yeah, you're asking that question, aren't you? And he, again, has zero reaction to her in the supposed very, very dramatic and serious moment in their lives. He has zero reaction to this. So this was when Meghan goes, I wasn't expecting the question, but I'm happy to answer it. And I feel like the hair toss is a reflection of how she's not super happy to answer this question. So let's watch this again. And then Harry blinks, and his reaction is interesting because that's the one point he does kind of look at her. And it's interesting because you got to wonder if he's in his mind thinking he wants to see how she reacts to this because he knows that she doesn't react well when things don't go her way. And so he is actually curious in this instance how she will handle it because it's not part of the playbook. Because I think what Harry knows probably more than anybody else is how fake she can be and how contrived everything about their public image is. And so I almost feel like he's not really in, but he is like watching this going, oh my goodness, how is she going to handle this? I want to know, how is she going to handle this? Because this is not going to according to the playbook. And Meghan's all about image. Harry knows this. So how is she going to react to this? Because she ain't going to be happy. He 100% knows this. And so she does a little hair toss. So let's actually listen to what she says.
I could see you're uncomfortable with my even going there. Do you?
I understand why you are, though. I wasn't expecting it, but I understand why you are because there is a through line, I think. And
so, yeah, Meghan's not super happy about that question. And part of it could be a couple of reasons. Number one, could be a part of her life she doesn't really want to talk about. I get that. But my personal feeling is that She likes that the message is out there, but she doesn't really want to go into it, in part because the more you dig, the harder it becomes to dig out. And again, my personal theory has always been I have never thought that what she said to Harry was actually serious. I think she was trying to manipulate him. It happened about the same point in pregnancy as what happened with his mother and Prince William. I feel like she was trying to follow the Diana playbook. But once you put something like that out there, you can't take it back. And because you can't take it back, this will continue to grow and you will get questions on this. And bravo to Jane Pauley to actually asking her a hard question. Let's listen to a little bit of this here.
When you've been through
I almost feel like if you watch the interview again, I don't feel like Jane Pauley is totally buying any of this. She's kind of like forced to do this. And she's like, yeah, let's listen to it. But I don't think she's very impressed, to be honest.
through any level of pain or trauma,
And again, Harry now eyeline. I wish I had like a ruler to be. Eyeline is above her. So he knows now she's on to the BS machine. He knows this now. So he doesn't really care anymore, but he was interested in how she would respond initially. I think because in part, he knew that she was not happy and that he was actually curious how she would handle it because he knows, I think, some of this is all BS. So let's see if there's anything else interesting. Doing slow-mo. Harry's now looking down. Meghan's, trying to elicit this reaction. Harry's looking down at his hands again. And I understand to him what she went through should be considered for him a failure because he's supposedly this mental health expert. Not really expert, but he has been involved in mental health charities. And so he should be able to help his wife. And I understand how for him, it's hard that he wasn't able to help her in this way. But at the same time, too, that he has no reaction to something that was incredibly traumatic to her, that has impacted their lives, that he has zero reaction to it, except for to adjust himself in his chair. And it's the one time he actually looks at her before looking basically anywhere else is telling. And I wanted to get to this part because I sort of missed this in my initial watch. That she hasn't really even begun to scrape the surface. Let's watch this.
open about it. And I haven't really scraped the surface on my experience.
But she's told us about this numerous times. So what is the additional experience? And is this a veiled threat to the royal family again? Oh, look, I haven't shared the fullness of my experience yet. Well, you went into pretty good detail already. So we kind of sort of know. So if that's not the full experience, then what is the full experience? And why have you been cagey up until this point? Again, she sort of boxes herself into corners by sort of trying to constantly make barbs and threats against the royal family in very veiled ways, but I don't think it comes across necessarily all that well. And I feel like here in this instance, it's like, well, either get up the goods or stop teasing. Or just like you don't want to talk about it, say, I don't want to talk about it. Like there are ways to address this that aren't making veiled threats, basically, which is kind of sort of what she does here, is sort of make a veiled threat. She's trying to look so earnest. So earnest. We should all believe Meghan and her experiences, and she has a lot to tell all of us because we need to listen. She's experienced something, and not to necessarily fully diminish what she's experienced, but it's also not compared to what a child has experienced because she had a fully functioning adult brain. And before the age of 25, 26, most people do not. And so her experience is going to be in some ways very different than a younger person. So again, I don't understand how she can be all that helpful to these families in some ways. And I just hate this. I want them not to be believed because she is saying that she knows people don't believe her. And that comes not from people not necessarily not liking Meghan Markle. For a small cadre does, but it comes from a history of her being very loose with the truth. She lied in other instances in that Oprah Winfrey interview. So how is she not potentially misleading with this story or doing half of it? I mean, even the whole story itself doesn't make sense. So you're having mental health issues. So your idea is to go to Palace HR. That doesn't even make any sense. And she was pregnant at the time. And does not your doctor and your entire medical team, is that not part of their responsibility to help you through mental health issues? Like, is that not part of the responsibility? I think that would be. So the story itself doesn't even make make any sense at all. And she would know that. So even if she went to Palace HR, they're probably looking at her going, well, we're here to help the palace staff that you're allegedly bullying. So why are you coming to us with this? I'd love to know if that story is actually true at all, because that just makes zero sense. Why in the world would you go to Palace HR when you're having these feelings rather than medical experts? That makes zero sense. I would love to know if that part of the story is actually true. So Meghan, again, has a lot of questions here. And so she's not believed because people don't want to believe her. She's not believed because of her own failings when it comes to truth telling. You see it. I love when sometimes the eyebrows go up because you really feel like she's trying to go, believe me, you believe me, right? And Jane Pauley kind of looks like, I don't know if I totally buy this or not. She really doesn't look like she totally buys it. She really doesn't. And Meghan, of course, saying we see here, hoping give someone the courage to ask. You know, you mean go to their HR department rather than calling like medical services? Yeah, I hope they don't do that. And you got to wonder too if this will be part of Meghan's upcoming book, whenever that happens to be, is that she goes into more detail about this alleged situation. And she looks down, he looks away. Again, their body language here, I feel like, is very not connected at all. Oh gosh, watching her do that is just kind of weird. Like she's trying so hard. Let's listen.
So if me voicing what I have overcome.
What have you overcome? And again, I have an issue with her retroactively wanting us to be sad about something that she's already over. I feel like that's weird.
Will save someone or asks or encourage someone in their life to really genuinely check in on them.
And so she's like trying to spin this BS, which just doesn't really make a ton of sense. Check in on someone. But like, how could people check in on her? It doesn't make a ton of sense. And again, wasn't that her husband's job? Wasn't that her medical team's job to supposedly check in on her when she was having these negative thoughts? It just, again, I don't feel like she can offer anybody really any help here.
And not assume that the appearance is good, so everything's okay, then that's worth it. I'll take a hit for that.
But the thing too is that according to the parents in this piece earlier, the mom said, and I'll put a little clip of this video in here real quick.
We had no idea what happened to our son. You know, he had a beautiful car. He worked and did that. He had a job he liked.
Sisters that loved him, parents that adored him.
Yes. And he was happy.
Her thing was, I have no clue what happened. Everything looked good. He had a good car. He had a good job. I don't know what happened. Well, clearly something did. Clearly the appearances were good. So if the appearance looked good, then you should have investigated more. And is Meghan saying that sort of almost against the parents? Or let me see again what she said exactly.
Life to really genuinely check in on them and not assume that the appearance is good, so everything's okay.
So she's saying basically that the parents in her own program failed their son by not looking at him more specifically. She's kind of throwing them under the bus here. Kind of sort of throwing them under the bus. Don't know if they caught that, but yeah.
Then that's worth it. I'll take a hit for that.
I hate it when she's saying take a hit. What does that even mean? The hit for what? You're getting hit because you're a hypocrite. Everybody knows that. You're getting hit sometimes because people don't believe you. Her acting as if she's getting hit for an entirely different reason, I feel like comes across as very disingenuous. She's being hit unfairly and that she'll take the barbs again. And it's like, but that's not why you're getting hit. That's not why people are, let's pull this down real quick in case you missed it, guys. This has been ratioed to heck. It has 2,900 upvotes and 22,000 downvotes. So it has like a 10% like ratio. If you don't know, that's pretty bad. That's really bad. Yeah, she's definitely taking a hit for that. And so then in this instance, she is sort of doing the fake, I'm looking lovingly at my husband here. Kind of sort of a plastered, very fake. I feel like she looks so fake. And he's not looking at her with a lot of affection here. And look, she's smiling and tossing her hair back and everything. Oh gosh, that looks so fake. Like, look at him. Everybody else has smiles and he's just not there. Something happened. I don't know what it was, but something happened. Again, I get the feeling, and maybe this is just Jane, but she just doesn't seem that engaged in any of this, to be quite honest. I thought this was interesting too. Harry by himself, not with Meghan. So we're still on slow speed. He's chatting with everyone. There's James Holt again, their team member, and Harry's over here not talking to Meghan, not around Meghan at all. And again, I find that rather telling, that he'd rather spend his time with them than with her. And that's part of what they should be doing anyways, but I feel like it's quite telling. We don't even know where Meghan is in this instance. And I got to wonder too if this is a member of the Sussex's work team. It seems like she might be there with James. And so Harry's over there kind of sort of with his team and away from whatever else is going on the porch and not really all that connected. So this is where Jane kind of takes Meghan to task again here. So let's listen.
And the two of you, this is it's a modest beginning.
And again, Harry leaning away. She's I would say sitting straight up. He's literally leaning away from her. Again, subtleties of body language. I'm not a body language expert, and I think most of body language, to be quite honest, is a bit bubkiss. But we all know certain things. If somebody's leaning away, that's not necessarily a good thing. If they're not looking at the other person, that genuinely tells you something as well. But I don't think she's particularly happy to be told that, hey, look, this is modest. So let's watch it again. This time on slow motion. Meghan's a little smirk trying to deal with the you could say a negative reaction here from Jane going, oh, this is modest. And it's not an army of parents. Jane says that. She doesn't give, she does not care. She's like, I was forced to do this.
It's not an army. It's a modest beginning. It's not an army of parents yet.
No.
But
and you can almost feel Jane going, why are you doing this? This is not big. This is really small. Basically, it's everybody you brought to me here. Like, why should we care about this? And that is an actually really, really good question. Because again, I go back to this idea, and Mark Cuban, if you watch Shark Tank, he goes over this. He hates it when companies are like, well, if I could just have more PR, things would be more successful. No. Organic growth is always best. And what that means is you have a good product and or service and or something else. And because of that, it organically grows. Meghan and Harry should not come when they have 5 people signed up. That's a little low. They should come when they have 500 people signed up. 5 people mean nothing. 500 means something. So Jane Pauley is going, I'm doing this just because you're Harry and Meghan and no other reason. No other reason am I doing this. I'm doing this because my bosses told me to do this because you are Harry and Meghan. That's the only reason. It's the only reason why I'm doing this. Otherwise, this is nothing. And it's true. It's nothing until they get more people. There's nothing to this. It's not that much.
what are your ambitions?
I think you have to start somewhere.
Meghan's plastered on reaction. You have to start somewhere. Yeah, you do. But you should also have a decent plan. And that's what, I mean, again, we've seen this time and time again from Harry and Meghan, especially Meghan. She launched ARO, which you could say a decent amount of fanfare, and zero follow through. There are no products. There are no services. There is no branding. There is no messaging. There is no timeline. There is nothing to the brand. That is a stupid decision. I'm sorry. That is a stupid decision from a business perspective. If you are launching a business, you should have messaging, branding, so many things in place. I didn't launch this channel with no branding, no messaging. And granted, my messaging has changed because I said this is going to be your stop for all things royal. But then I realized because of news and different things, I need to really have different channels to have different avenues. And I'm like, well, this is more about commentary. I will cover news too, but it's complicated. But Meghan is launching this with nothing. It is nothing at this point but a general idea. And it's better to grow something and then reveal, I think, that it's connected to Harry and Meghan, rather than saying, because what they're telling the audience right now is you should sign up because this is connected to Harry and Meghan. No other reason. No other reason. We're trying to help parents, but we're Harry and Meghan, and that's why you should sign up. So let's watch Meghan slow motion here. She doesn't know quite where to go. And I don't think she's used to somebody actually going off script. I applaud Jane Pauley, I think, a bit for going off script here. She was like, she held them to task to a certain way. It's very gentle, but she asked them the tough questions, and Meghan didn't really have great answers. A great answer is not, well, you got to start somewhere, right? The great answer is what we found already. We've seen this impacting people. We've seen it having an effect. We've seen change. We've seen how these families have come together, yada, yada, yada. This is still vague, banality. So I can see the subtitles here and I already feel, and again, you watch it one time and you get something second time, but I like going over this again because what she's speaking in is just generalities. She has no idea. She has no idea. Harry doesn't really either.
I think the simplest thing that anyone watching this or anyone who's able to make change, to look at it through the lens of, what if it was my daughter? What if it was my son?
But that doesn't mean anything. What always bothers me about them is that they're so vague. This is a very vague statement, basically saying, looking through the lens of what happens if this happens to my daughter or son. I mean, the great way to do it too is to pivot back to the parents, although I don't think these parents that she included here are the best example because they don't have any lessons to offer anyone because they've essentially admitted they have no clue what happens, which probably means they weren't all that up to speed about what was going on in their son's life. And that's not necessarily laying blame at them, but that's the really only conclusion you can come to is that they obviously missed something. I don't know what it was. But they can't offer you anything because the whole point of this organization, if you actually look on their website, is to not blame the parents. It's like the number one thing. It's like, well, then how do you, not that you take blame, but how do you learn anything if you don't see where the failures were? You can't learn anything from that. And so this organization is set up to fail because there are no lessons to be learned. So there's no lessons to pass on. Again, a simple lesson is I wish I had told my son to give me his phone before he went to bed at night. So that way I had it and he wasn't on his phone. I wish I had not let my child have a tablet unattended because they got across this video and maybe it was like pornography. Now they're addicted to porn and they're like 13. I wish I hadn't done that. Like concrete things rather than, well, what if this happened to your son or daughter? What happened? We have 3 different scenarios too. Bullying, drug addiction, and maybe depression. All 3 of these issues potentially encompassing all these parents. And so how is this supposed to help anybody?
My son or my daughter who comes home, who are joyful, who I love, and one day right under my roof.
So I did not catch this until I was doing the editing for this video. But did you notice she said, my children, my roof? Is that not a little bit of a Freudian slip? Because her husband is literally sitting right next to her. And wouldn't it make more sense to say, our children, our son and daughter, our roof? I do find that somewhat indicative of something maybe going a bit wrong in Sussex Town because, again, it makes so much more sense to me to say our instead of my.
Our entire lives change because.
And again, Harry's leaning away from her. And I just want to, again, re-emphasize this. I emphasized this in my last video, but I just want people to hear it again.
Of something that was completely out of our control.
It is not out of your control. That is a terrible, horrible, awful message to tell other parents is that, well, the internet thing, it's totally out of our control. Aren't you parents? Aren't there things in your control? I think there are things in your control. Yes, there are aspects in life that you cannot fully control. But this idea that you can control nothing is a terrible, horrible message to parents. Telling them, basically saying, well, give your kid whatever they want, whenever they want. And if something happens, well, you can't control it, because it was the internet's company's job to control it. It's like, no. I think this is an issue, sometimes a parental responsibility. I mean, it's a two-way street here. Basically, what she's not saying is that she wants to put, if something happens to her kids, it's because the social media companies are to blame. Not because she was perhaps maybe not a great parent on a particular issue. No, no, no. It's the company's fault. Terrible, horrible message. But let's watch her in slow motion here. Try to wax on and give horrific, horrific advice. And Harry again, looking totally away from her. Look at him. Look at him. He's not even looking at her. She's even looking at Meghan, but Harry's looking at the ground, literally leaning as far away from his wife as he can. Leaning. Like the lean here is pretty astonishing. Again, not looking at her. She's trying to be earnest, trying to talk about my son and my daughter and how I as a parent have zero control over their lives. Don't you know? I have zero control over their lives. I mean, this almost feeds into the surrogacy fake kid stuff because she's like, well, I have zero control because she has no kids. I mean, I don't believe that in the slightest, but she's almost playing into that by saying something like this. And again, parents out there, I am not a parent, so I can't say, but I know what my mother would have done. And my mother would have been watching us, and she did watch us like hawks when it came to the internet. And she did this when it was just beginning. And I know it's so much harder now, but our mom was aware of what we were doing 9 times of the time. And that required a lot of intention on her part. So, Meghan, what she's saying right now almost is that she's kind of an absent parent. Like, I'm not trying to criticize her parenting, but that's kind of sort of what she's saying. 100%. Is that, well, this thing's totally out of my control. So their kids must have tablets in their room. And it's like, why, who are so joyful, who I love and everything, why do you need to say it that way? That just seems weird to me. It just seems, of course you love your kids. Of course, they're joyful right now. They're also 3 and 5. But it's just a weird way I mean, they always talk in a weird way about their kids. And again, still, he's kind of, his eyesight is over there. He's not really looking at her. He's looking down. Harry's not looking at her. He's leaning away from her still. He might be kind of sort of looking at her now. It's hard to tell. I almost thought, did he roll his eyes? It almost looked like he rolled his eyes. No, I think he's just blinking. Oh, I hate how she said that. Such terrible, horrible parenting advice.
Through the lens as a parent, there is no way to see that any other way than to try to find a solution.
Well, the solution might be decent parenting. That might be also the solution. It might not be the solution to include censorship. It might be good parenting. And that requires a lot of intention, work, and effort. And Harry and Meghan have proven time and time again, they're not interested in hard work and effort. They're more interested in the flash of it. And we see this reflected in their PDA. Their PDA has always been very touchy-feely, hand-holding, doing little whispers to each other while they're on engagements and not being able to, there's, times where they keep having to, she rounds him in an engagement and she puts her hand on the top of his back and he holds her hand behind his as he's talking to somebody else. That level of excessiveness, I think, is fake. And it is flashy, but lacks substance, because the substance of a good relationship is not your expression of PDA. It is what you do behind the scenes and what you do to help build a relationship that's built on a good foundation of trust and love and understanding and friendship, and those things that create longevity in a relationship. Whereas Harry and Meghan's is all flash and so little substance. And so when it comes to this whole situation that they're trying to promote, I just can't help but think, do you guys really care? Are you really helping anyone? I don't really think you are here. And when it came to their PDA, you look at them and all you can see, you don't see unity, you see cracks. You see a husband who's not engaged with his wife and what she's saying, and a wife who's not really engaged with her husband, or at least trying to force it or something. So when it comes to their future, it seems somewhat in doubt in some ways. And that's been surprising because they've made such an effort and such a fuss over how in love they are and that they are, the greatest love story ever. But I see cracks. Whereas with Catherine and William, you don't really ever see the cracks, in part because they don't make much of a fuss about their relationship. They don't make having PDA a huge part of their dynamic. It's something that they do, and it's something that they do from time to time, but it's very conscientious. It's very minimal. It's not done for attention. It's done because they love each other and they want to show affection from time to time. Whereas Harry and Meghan, it feels like it's done more for the look of it, not for the substance of the relationship. And so the moment that goes away, it becomes glaringly obvious to everyone on the planet. It becomes so obvious to everyone on the planet. And that's why I think their public image, I always said, don't do it. But they continue to do it. And now, if cracks are really starting to emerge, if a fight, it could just be a day of fight, but that they couldn't get over it enough to get together and put on a decent interview. It's really bad. And I would say, even the PR itself, of course, it's bad here, even though they should be trained by PR professionals. I've gone through PR training, how to respond to questions, how to turn questions that you don't want, negative questions, into positive. And they kind of did that, but they also kind of sort of didn't. And I think it's again a reflection of unthought out this is, how much minimal effort they do in so much of what they present to the world. And so this relationship, it could go on for a bit longer, but it'll be interesting to see if this is just a flash in the pan or if this becomes a consistent theme. So guys, let me know what you think of this video. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you soon. Bye.